Okay, so if you look on the back page of your handout, you'll see the dish that I prepared today. It's one that I've been making a lot over the years. It was my first foray into foreign foods. So it's a carrot pudding common in India. So some of you may have already had a chance to taste this at Indian restaurants. It's one of the desserts you can get in an Indian restaurant. So it's really good. If you like the version I make, I think you're going to like the restaurant versions a lot better. But if you have a chance to try it today, go ahead and try it. So it's pretty simple to make. It works out well for a crock pot. I should say it works out for my old-fashioned crock pot, because my old-fashioned crock pot still has the potentiometer where I can control the heat. Most modern crock pots don't have that anymore. Most modern crock pots, you only have a few settings. So if you're going to try to make this in your crock pot and you only have a few settings, I'll give you a couple of tips of how you can do that easier in your crock pot. So the big thing with it is you want to use ghee or clarified butter. In a lot of ways, ghee is just clarified butter, only slightly burnt. And I say slightly burnt, I should say toasted, because you can accidentally burn it and it's not nearly as good when you do. So what you'll want to do is either, if your crock pot will let you, make your own clarified butter, which is basically just melting butter at a lower temperature, enough to drive off the moisture, so you'll see a little bit of steam coming off of it. You'll start to see the solids in the milk turn into white, almost like cottage cheese consistency stuff. It's real small, but that kind of color and consistency. And then if you keep burning off all the water, those things will start to solidify and start to turn toasted brown. So if you stop it when it turns toasted brown, you've got ghee. If you stop it before it turns toasted brown, but you still have the solids starting to form, you've got more of clarified butter. Both of them taste pretty similar. You just get more of a nutty toasted flavor if you let it reach the browning stage. So if your crock pot will let you brown inside your crock pot because you can control the temperature, do it in your crock pot. Normally with clarified butter and ghee, you strain out those solids. When I'm making it in my crock pot, I don't care. They add a little bit of flavor, but they don't really change the flavor, so it's not a big concern for me. When I'm making clarified butter or making my own homemade ghee, and I'm going to set it aside and put it in the fridge, I will strain it and take those solids out, because if you leave those solids in the ghee itself, in the clarified portion of the butter, those solids can start to turn rancid. So when you make clarified butter, the nice thing is you make it, you strain it, you put it in the fridge, you can keep it in the fridge for months and it won't go bad. So as long as you get most of the moisture out. If you leave those solids in there, it will start to go bad just like butter would after a while. So when I'm making it just in the crock pot, I know it's not going to stay around that long and it doesn't change the flavor that much, so I don't even bother with the straining. I just leave it there in the food. So if you're making it at home, I would suggest you either clarify your butter in a separate skillet if your crock pot only has a low and a high setting, or you just take the easy way and go buy ghee. Used to be, ghee was kind of hard to find. You'd have to go to a specialty store to find it. Nowadays, it's in Publix, it's in Walmart. It's pretty much every shopping store you're going to go to. So that's the only real hard part about this, is clarifying your butter, keeping an eye on it so it doesn't scorch. After that, it's pretty easy. You grate your carrots, or if you have a food processor, run them through the food processor, grind them up nice and smooth. Today, I went with the grating method because that's the way I started cooking them. It kind of works for adults. I'm not sure children would like it because you're going to get little pieces of carrots in there. If you use it in a food processor, it might blend it up enough where children will just think it's a dessert without really knowing it's carrots. So I grated for today. Then I throw it in with the ghee or the clarified butter. Cook that up for a while. Try to drive off some of the moisture from the carrots. You want the carrots to start to brown up just a little bit and soften up quite a bit. And that will also get rid of a lot of the moisture in the carrots, which is important because later on we're going to add a lot more moisture with the milk. So the dish is pretty simple. It's butter or ghee, carrots, milk, a little bit of sugar, and a little bit of seasoning. So not a whole lot of ingredients go into it and not a whole lot of work go into it if you buy the ghee ahead of time. So the tricky part is when you're putting in all that dairy, all that milk, it's going to take a long time for all of the moisture in that milk to evaporate. So that's why I throw it in the crock pot and I just let it run for a couple of hours. So depending on how hot your crock pot gets, that will determine how long it takes for that to dry off. So I can't really tell you how long you're going to let it sit there. You'll just check on it every 20 minutes, every half hour, See if it's starting to lose a lot of the liquid and starting to reach a consistency you like. So let it cook for quite a while. The milk will start to evaporate, start to condense. I have done a shortcut method and it works pretty good where I don't even bother using whole milk to start with. I just start with condensed milk. Cuts the cooking time down dramatically as long as you make sure you cook your carrots in the ghee enough so that they're well cooked when the whole thing finishes. Does that make sense? Okay. So after that, just let the milk simmer away until it starts to thicken up. Just like regular pudding, it's still going to be pretty liquidy when it's hot, when it's in the crock pot or your Dutch oven if you decide to use a Dutch oven. So while it's still hot, it's going to look like it's still too runny. That's okay. If you prefer to refrigerate it and let it cool down and serve it refrigerated, a lot of those fats in the milk, in the ghee or the butter will start to solidify, and then it will thicken up quite a bit at that point. So if you're worried that, oh, I've been cooking this for 2 hours and it still looks like it's going to be soup when I'm done, you might have already reached the point where you can safely turn it off, let it cool down, and it will thicken up as it cools down. So I don't add my seasonings till the end. This is one of those dishes where you're using cardamom seasoning, which is one of the pricier seasonings. It's not expensive like saffron, but it is a little bit more than something like cinnamon. So instead of losing all the flavor in the cooking process, I wait until I'm on my last 10 minutes or when I'm getting ready to turn everything off. Then I'll add the seasoning then, and then let the seasoning set in there when it cools down. And sometimes when it's sitting in the fridge and it cools down, cold foods lose their ability to let you taste the flavors also. So sometimes I'll sprinkle a little bit more spice on top when I take it out of the fridge and serve it. I did not today, so you're just going to get the regular way today. So that's my dish. Like I said, you can cook it in your crock pot, or you can modify it to work in a skillet or a Dutch oven if you want. I'd use a Dutch oven for today because there's no way I could make up 3 servings in my little crock pot. So.
All right, so my recipe is on page 5, the crock pot granola. Super easy. You kind of just throw everything in the crock pot and it's done. You just let it cook. So I did add rolled nuts, or rolled grains, sorry. So there's rolled oats in here. You can kind of play with this recipe, so you can add any nuts you want. I added walnuts and pecans because those are my favorite. But you can add almonds. You can even add seeds, so sunflower seeds or pumpkin seeds. I kind of kept it simple. Didn't add any seeds. And then it also calls for ground flaxseed meal, which I skipped that part as well. I just added more raw nuts. I added cinnamon. I kind of measured with my heart on that part. Also with the maple syrup that I added, I kind of measured with my heart with that as well. Salt, vanilla extract, and then it also calls for either coconut oil or just regular light oil, and I just used regular light olive oil. And then for your dried fruit, again, you can kind of play with this recipe. I like cranberries. It did call for apricots, I believe, but even though I like apricots, I just feel like it didn't go well with the granola, so I added cranberry. And then egg whites. So you kind of mix or whisk the egg whites until they're frothy, and you have to wait for them to be room temperature. And so you just spray the bottom of the crock pot. I did double this recipe, but so basically you spray the bottom, you add your oats, your nuts, seeds, flaxseed if you're going to use flaxseed, cinnamon, and you kind of just combine all of that. And then once that's all done, you kind of let it sit there and you start working with your egg whites. You start whisking that until it becomes frothy, like I said. Then you add your maple syrup, your olive oil, your vanilla extract, and you add that to the crock pot. And basically that's pretty much it. You just let it sit there. You have to, leave the lid off a little bit to let the steam out. And that's pretty much it. You have to turn it or stir it every 30 minutes. And yeah, it was super duper easy. And then after it's completely done, I cooked it for about 2.5 hours. I put it on a cookie sheet. That way it gets crispy and you just let it sit there and it kind of hardens up a little bit, but super duper easy. I enjoyed making it. I would definitely make it again and try to play with it a little bit more since it was my first time making it, but yeah, super duper easy. So that's pretty much it.
All right, we're going to kind of do this in reverse today for me. I'm going to show you what we're going to end up with, and then we're going to stick it in the oven while we're talking so it can be doing its thing. Let me just set a timer so we don't have charcoal here in a few minutes. We've already done that, remember that? Okay. So I really don't do crock pot. That's kind of my wife's thing, nothing against it, just that's her thing. My thing is baking, okay? So I thought, I'm going to do an accompaniment. So I made, these are called angel biscuits. I would hold it up, but then it'd be all over the floor, okay? So what we're going to do is, you guys kind of see the white dots in there? That's the love stuff, otherwise known as butter. But we're just going to throw these in here real quick. Have you ever had a biscuit and you've made a bunch and you have them with dinner and they're great? And then what happens? You wrap them up and you put them on a plate. And like at our house, we wouldn't refrigerate these. We just leave them out on the dinner table till lunch or whatever the next day. Then you cut into one, and you might as well cut into a hockey puck, right? That's been my experience with these. So I heard of this angel biscuit, and I was like, well, okay. It's supposed to, I was actually reading an old Southern cookbook, and it had the history of the angel biscuit in there, and they said that I guess when people got married, this was one of the first things that they made back in the 50s. It's like, oh, cool, okay. So this is a little bit different, and of course I remodified it for a couple of reasons, and we're just going to go through the ingredients here so you guys can kind of see why. First thing is, when you make these, this has been designed, you guys have seen this before, King Arthur flour. This is their all-purpose one. You don't want the blue one for this because or else you'll be chewing, that's the bread flour. This is the all-purpose. This still has a lot of protein content in the flour, so I would look for this. You can get it at Walmart, Publix, any of those kinds of places. It's very consistent, so if you have a recipe you like with this, and you make it a year later, and you pick up another bag of flour, guess what? It's going to work the same. If you get like a store brand, there's kind of some variance there that it may or may not work out the same. All right. You know, my favorite thing is, if you guys remember a year ago, right, we did the potato rolls. So if you missed a potato roll, we'll have to do that again sometime, because I know a lot of people said, oh, you know, that was a good little thing we did. So I thought, well, what if I re-engineer this to add potato flake? This is the same thing that's in those rolls that you guys liked. So I did some math and figured it out. I know math's no fun, but I like this. If the recipe that I come across says you need to boil potatoes, mash them, and no. I'm taking the Suzanne route with this thing, okay? Too much work. Plus, this is dry. It's not going to mess up the moisture content in whatever it is you're making. This is going to be a consistent product. So and don't get the fancy one that's like herb and, well, I guess you could if you wanted to for this. But I just get the plain old dollar box mashed potatoes from, you know, Big Blue. So, all right, the sugar, let's back up a minute. So we got yeast. Yes, that's instant yeast, it's like in your bread. That's a traditional angel biscuit. That's one thing that is different than like a drop biscuit or something like that. We've got granulated sugar. That's not really there to make it sweet. It's there for browning. So it's not going to be a sweet biscuit when we get done with it. Salt, obviously for flavor. If all you have is salted butter in your house, don't run out and buy unsalted. Just use half a teaspoon of salt instead of 3/4 of salt. So just reduce that. Baking powder. How much is in there? That's not a misprint. 1 tablespoon, not 1 teaspoon. No, we're going to the max. So I like this Argo baking powder. The reason, I've mentioned this in the past, but for those of you that are new, I have no life, okay? So I like to read up on this stuff. This is what they call a 70-30. It gives you 30% lift in the bowl, 70% lift in the oven. So some of the other brands don't do that. So I use this. So if I do like a muffin or a banana bread, something like that that's going to require baking powder, I use this. And this I've seen at Publix. I'm not sure if Walmart carries it, but you can get it. It's, it's cheap. Oh, by the way, if you found this in the back of your cupboard since 1965, it's probably time to throw it out, okay? Once a year, pitch this and buy another one, because it's not worth messing up all your cookies and that kind of stuff, especially if you got expensive ingredients like nuts or chocolate chips, that kind of stuff. You don't want a $2 ingredient making the whole thing not go, right? That's no fun. Same thing with the yeast. Yes, you can freeze yeast, refrigerate it. About once a year, I pitch it. I can go to Sam's, get 2 bricks of it for $5. It's 2 pounds. I usually give 1 brick away to a friend because I don't need that much. Okay, regular biscuit. I know there's this big thing about, do you use vegetable shortening or butter? I said, let's go for all 3. So there's vegetable shortening, right, for tenderness. But then I know people were going to get on me about, well, wait a minute, there's no butter flavor, so I added the butter. Now, oil is a magical ingredient. It stays liquid at room temp, or even in the oven. Just like those potato rolls you guys liked. They stay soft. So I added a little bit of oil in here. It's it's on the right-hand side, 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil. So yes, you've got shortening, butter, and vegetable oil in this. And 2 leaveners. And flour. What are we eating? We're basically eating pie dough at this point. It's just in a different format. All right, milk. So it's just plain standard milk. You don't really need buttermilk for this. You could add it because baking powder's already got the acid in it to make it go. You don't need like baking soda and add a buttermilk to activate it. So I'm not too worried about that. And then of course, now if you want to dress these up a little bit, I didn't do this today, you could add your garlic powder, onion powder, and cheddar cheese, mix it together, bang, now you got yourself one of those cheddar biscuit things from that place with the lobster, okay? So, the whole trick to this is in the folding, and I put the instructions on page 7 if you guys want to kind of see how that's done. Basically, once you get it together as like a mass, dump it out on the counter, and then take, like it shows in the diagram on the bottom, page 7, you're going to take one side, go like this, take the other side, go like this, rotate it, pat it back out, fold it, rotate it, fold it. We're taking a note out of the croissant manual, if any of you have had croissants, okay? If you've not, you should have a croissant. They're very good. For those of you, how many were in the pie class? Okay, so you guys know, right? So for those of you that weren't there, we do have a couple of these left that we had the master class, was it last week or the week before? Pie dough, we made pie dough. I do the exact same thing. If you fold your pie dough like croissant, you will get the layers. That's what pastry chefs had taught me, and it works great. So we're doing that. The heat on this is 425. You want hot. So that way, the baking powder and the yeast goes, hey, it's time to do something. It's getting warm in here, right? Which we're going to find out here in a minute. They are growing, so that's a good sign that they're doing something in there. The other thing is, what I like to do is I'll put the flour, potato flakes, yeast, sugar, salt, baking powder, basically all the dry stuff. I did this last night, and I do it with my pie dough. I put it on my KitchenAid. Put the paddle attachment on, put it on the very first speed. You get crazy with that knob, it's going to go all over the place. You're going to be wearing it, okay? I've done it. Low and slow is the way you want to go with this. Just let it stir. That'll give you time to measure out the milk and the vegetable oil in like a measuring cup. So, now it's stirring with a paddle attachment. I take my vegetable shortening, throw that in there, give it a minute. It will actually rub, like if you've done it before, right? It rubs the shortening into the flour. Then I take and I cube up the butter, throw the butter in there and give it a minute. Now, if the butter doesn't break down in the KitchenAid, you can actually go in there and pinch them a little bit. turn the mixer off before you do this. It'll end up much better for you. Okay, I got to put that out there. So the vegetable oil is going to go in with the milk, so that's not a big deal. And then basically just drizzle that in real quick. It comes into a really wet mass. What I do is I just throw it on the counter. Get you one of these, right? Black Friday is coming. If you're looking to spend a few bucks on yourself, they may even have these at like the dollar store these days, I'm not sure. So I pat it out, it's stuck to the counter, you're not getting it up. So with this, has a flat edge. Okay? This is a great little tool, and it's just a piece of plastic. We've used it for other things for our baking classes here at What's Cooking in the master class. So just get you some of these. If you don't have a KitchenAid, I understand. The easiest way around that is just to go buy one. No, just kidding. All right, now honestly, if you don't have a KitchenAid, right, get one of these things. I can get these at Walmart. The dollar store may even have them. For when we did the master class, a week or two ago, I'm just double checking our timer here because we want biscuits, not charcoal. We started out with 2 knives, and pretty quickly we realized this was not going to work. And I just happened to bring this. I said, hey, you could use one of these at home. And then before we knew it, right, everybody was like, it was a lot faster. So spent, I don't know, it's like $5 or something. It's not that expensive. These are a great tool. But if you do have the KitchenAid, I would say try it. Because the other thing you can do with the KitchenAid is you could quadruple this batch in your KitchenAid. Especially if you have, if anybody's got issues with this, right? The KitchenAid can do the work for you instead of pushing, right? So that's a big help. Yeah, so basically you just throw them out on parchment. You're going to let it rise on the counter for about an hour, which is a little bit different. You know, usually you want cold, cold, cold. Yes, you want your milk, your butter, your shortening, all that cold. Just leave it on the counter for an hour, let it rise. Then I just put some plastic wrap over the entire thing, threw it in the ice box overnight. Refrigerator, yep, yeah. You could, so I know somebody's going to ask, can you freeze them? Yes, I've done that. So you could freeze them into individuals, throw them in a Ziploc bag, I guess. When you want some, just pull some out, throw them on a tray, bang, you got yourself fresh biscuits. You could do that. So I know how you guys are. I might have to zip this in the microwave again. If you want, you can hit them with some butter when they come out. So why not? I mean, it's already got 3 fats in there. Let's just add more to it. It's going to be great.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, don't tell the cardiologist, right? So that's about it that I've got for you today. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
How many biscuits does this recipe?
It makes 9.
9.
So the other thing you'll notice in the booklet, it says put it into a 6-inch square. I don't do the cutter thing. To me, again, I'm channeling my inner Suzanne. That's another thing I got to wash. I got to put the scraps together. No. So what I do is after it's a little square, I trim just a little bit of the edges off because if you don't, it won't rise properly. So then I just take a ruler and I take this thing. And I'm like, okay, 2 inches, 2, 4, dun dun, 2, 4, dun dun, and that gives you 9. And so they're square biscuits, not round, and I just scoop them up with this because they're still adhered to the counter. Scoop it up, stick it on my sheet pan. Scoop it up, it's almost like production work at that point. Real easy. That's why these are great to have. So yeah, I do the square ones instead of the round ones, but if you want, hey, you got your great-grandmother's round cutter and that's your connection to that, great, go for it. You could use a pizza cutter too if you don't have that, or you don't want to use. This is blunt, by the way. It will not harm your countertop. This is not sharp, and it's plastic. So, could you use a pizza wheel? Sure. Just don't press down real hard. If you're going to use a chef's knife, don't call me. Okay. So, good questions, eh?
What's the name of that tool with the handle?
This thing. Pastry cutter is what you're looking for when you go to the store. And if it looks like this, you know, it's got it's kind of blunt, but it's sharp enough it'll go through, you know.
But that's what you do to mix it.
Yes, this is for mixing. So you put your flour and all your stuff in. You're going to start with the shortening. By the way, I put the shortening in the freezer. I try to get as cold as I can. Then I put it in a bowl and I just work it like this until it's kind of all evenly distributed. Then I put the butter in. I do the same thing with pie dough. Works great. And I've used this for years until finally I said, why don't I do this in the KitchenAid? I say give it a try. It's a different, it's if you had a dinner roll and a biscuit had a love child together. It's a brisket. Or is it a broil? Hey, I had to think all night on this stuff, you know? So, all right, sounds good. Oh, question?
What does vegetable oil actually do? Because if you're trying to stay away from that, do you have to use it, or is there a substitute?
All right, so the question was, what does the vegetable oil do if it's specifically something you're trying to, stay away from in your diet? Do you need it? No, you don't need it. Cut it out. You may just want to add an extra, I'd say an extra tablespoon to your butter just to make up for it.
Not olive oil, though?
Oh, you could use olive oil. Any kind of oil will work because it'll stay a liquid. That's the thing. But if you have a thing against oils in general, I would just take it, divide it out, and add it back into the butter. But the oil, again, is there to keep it soft the next day because the oil will stay liquid no matter what. That's the whole trick. Yeah. Yeah, if you want to use olive oil or grapeseed oil, avocado oil, if you got some other, thing you like. If you want to get fancy and use some kind of like walnut oil or that turns you on, whatever, try it. There's all kinds of oils out there, so.
So as those of you that have been to this before know, I do easy. That's all I do. My recipes tend to be very easy. That's just who I am. So I decided to do something a little bit different. I found this recipe on Facebook from a family friend, and it's chocolate-covered peanut clusters, which I thought, oh, this will be something fun as we approach the holidays. We make this, I think I found it 2 or 3 years ago since we'd moved down here, and it's been a hit just because it's very easy and it makes a lot of them. So very first thing, if you have not used a Crock Pot liner, this is a must for chocolate-covered peanut clusters. It just makes the cleanup so much easier. So I would definitely suggest you use that. And then you want to pour in the ingredients in order. So it's 2 16-ounce containers of lightly salted peanuts, a bag of semi-sweet chocolate chips, a bag of milk chocolate chips, a bag of peanut butter chips, and this one is a mix of milk chocolate and peanut butter, so more power. Woo! That worked out great. And then the very last thing that you do is one of these. It has 12, it comes in one big bar of the almond bark, and you just break it into the individual bars and place it all around the top of the crock pot. Turn it on low. Mix it every 10, 15 minutes, and as you're going, it takes about an hour and 15 minutes for all the chocolate to melt, but you want to mix it and just kind of dig into the bottom, making sure that all the peanuts are getting covered. The white chocolate's getting mixed in, the peanut butter chips are getting mixed in with the chocolate. That's it, guys. It's not hard. Then I like my little scoop. This is it says 1.5 teaspoon scoop. So obviously I wasn't sure how many people, so these are smaller. I still use the same scoop, I just didn't fill it as much as I would normally, like when I make it at Christmas time. But finished product. So there's 9 dozen here. I mean, that's all with that. So it makes, if you make them bigger, then obviously you don't have that many. But it's just something easy. Obviously, if you don't like, peanuts, this wouldn't be the recipe for you. If you have extra of, one, like I had a little bit extra peanuts because I had some that were left over, so I just threw in a few more. Of course, I always have a little bag of chocolate chips, threw that in. It works out, and that made it well when my husband decided he should have some ahead of you guys. So, so that worked out well. So then it's just a matter after it's doing that, I pull out all my different cookie sheets, line them with, you can use wax paper, or you can use the parchment paper, whatever you have, and I just lay it on there, and I just scoop them out, and then it's just a matter, I put them in the refrigerator for an hour. I did this Thursday night, because I had time Thursday night, because we never get trick-or-treaters. So I just did that and put them in there, and then Friday morning, took them all and just packaged them all, put away. So it's that simple, and you all know that's all I do anyway, is simple. But if you want more peanut butter chips, again, you can experiment. If you like different, I know there are wafers, if you prefer that instead of the almond bark. I think it's easy enough because it all just melts together and blends together perfectly. So it's not hard. It's not anything difficult, but it just works out really well, and it's an easy, makes a nice little holiday, on the tray. And so I thought, well, I'm going to share it this time, because that way, as we get into the holidays, if any of you wanted that recipe, that would work well.
I felt bad that we didn't have the pumpkin class last month, so I went ahead and made a pumpkin soup. So now you get your crock pot and your pumpkin all in one. I follow the Suzanne route of making everything really simple. So this is just a can of, pureed pumpkin, some chopped tomatoes. I wanted to show everybody this product. If you're lazy like me and you don't want to chop tomatoes, but you don't like the ones in the can because they get that kind of tinny flavor to them, you can buy tomatoes in a box. Who knew? I got this at Walmart. It's just pure tomatoes. There's nothing else in it. Very simple. You just open it up and dump it in there. What's that? It's just over by the other canned tomatoes. I think it's down kind of on the bottom because it's not the ones that everybody buys, but I thought it was very handy. So you can use the can, but sometimes it just has a metallic taste from being in the can. So when I saw this, I'm like, oh, this is perfect, So it's totally up to you, but yes, you could do that. But this is just it's very simple. It's just the pumpkin, the tomatoes, carrots, onions, celery, a few spices. So I hope you enjoy. Any questions?